I recently learned of some chilling details about a person that was heavily involved in my life as a child, and I thought I would share the story. Throughout my childhood, I was extremely shy and did not find myself going out of my way to make new friends in new settings. I had recently started preschool at my grandmother's church, and I remember being on the playground playing by myself when a woman walked up and introduced herself to me. Her name was Candy, and she looked just like any other sweet old woman. She almost reminded me of my own grandmother, with her abundance of white curls on her head. And Candy was a volunteer at the church, and typically watched over all the children while they played, so we would see each other fairly often. I can't remember much about the start of this friendship, but I presume one thing led to another before I was frequently spending time with her in and out of school. My parents were grateful to have someone who was interested in watching me, as I was the youngest of 3, and my parents worked full-time, while also taking my brother and sister to and from school, sports, or friends' houses. So having a helping hand was very much a blessing for them. To be honest, I don't remember too many details about spending time with Candy. I suppose we spent most of our time frequenting ice cream shops, parks, etc. I do have one memory of going to her house, though, where I had never been before, and as she was showing me around, I remember passing through the dining room and seeing another girl who looked to be about 10 or 12 years old. Candy introduced me to her, and told me that she lived down the street and would often spend a lot of time at her house. I'm not sure why, but I remember being very jealous. I guess I was jealous that Candy also cared and spent time with another little girl. I had never felt that way before, and I'm not sure why I remember that so clearly. For some reason, that was the only time I went to her house. Fast forward a few years, and now I'm in 1st grade. I had totally forgotten all about Candy, and had not seen her ever since I had graduated preschool 2 years prior. My neighbors, who I carpooled with, had dropped me off at my house after school one day, and I spotted a Target grocery bag hooked on our front door. I wasn't sure what it could be, or why my brother or sister didn't bring it inside when they arrived home from school, about an hour or so before me. Once I took it inside, I noticed writing on the bag indicating that there was a gift inside for me from Candy. I ran upstairs to my room, and to my surprise there were several adorable brand new outfits inside just for me. I immediately tried them on, and was excited to show my mom when she came home from work. After my mom got home, I eagerly showed her the outfits that Candy had left for me. Unfortunately, my mom was not as excited as I was. In fact, she was quite angry. She yelled at me to take them off, and that she would be returning them right away. I was confused as to why she was so upset with me. What did I do wrong? These were free clothes, a gift. Wouldn't it be rude to return a gift to someone? To avoid being punished, though, I put the clothes back in the bag and handed them to my mother. We never spoke of it again, and Candy slipped my mind once more for the next several years. A few years ago, my sister was home visiting from college. With nothing else to do, we decided to go to Target to shop for useless things we didn't need. As we were walking through the parking lot, the thought of that Target bag from Candy suddenly dawned on me once more. I proceeded to laugh and ask my sister if she remembered, and if she knew why Mom was in such an awful mood that day, to force me to give the clothes back. My sister stopped dead in her tracks. She said to me, "Wait, do you not remember what Candy did to us?" And taken aback, I shook my head and begged her to tell me what happened. She refused to talk about it and just told me to go ask Mom. Once again, the thought of Candy slipped my mind, and I never remembered to ask my mother about what happened until I was in college a few years later. We were saying goodbye to my grandmother after grabbing lunch when she mentioned to my mom that someone's funeral was that weekend. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just staring at each other. After my grandmother left, I asked my mom who they were talking about. She informed me of Candy's death. The realization that I'd never heard the true stories about this woman crossed my mind. I asked my mom about what my sister refused to speak on. My mother proceeded to relay the horrible stories to me about the old woman that tried to take me away from my family. At the beginning of the friendship, Candy genuinely was a big help to my family and was someone that they deeply trusted. However, Candy's intentions were questioned by my grandmother, who shared a few of her concerns with my father after hearing some odd stories from her friends at the church. She felt as though something was off with Candy, and she didn't like that I was spending so much time with her. And coming from a woman who never had said a negative thing about anyone, my father became slightly wary. He assumed my grandmother was just being overly cautious at first. After some time of Candy watching over and babysitting me, her demeanor started to change. She started acting possessive and became hostile towards my parents. She would show up unannounced to our house, asking for me, and if I wasn't there, she would become incredibly angry and yell at my parents about how awful they were. She would continuously tell them that they didn't deserve me and that only she was worthy of taking care of me. This happened several times before my parents finally told her to stop coming or they would call the police. This inclined her to start calling the house and leaving messages for me, which my parents obviously would not tell me about. In these voicemails, she would cry to me and try to convince me to leave with her and leave my family. She would talk about how awful my parents were and how she could give me a much better life than they ever could. The voicemails that were intended for me soon turned to threats for my parents. She threatened to call the police or child services, to have me removed from the home and placed into her care. She threatened to tell the police about my parents' violence and abuse towards me and my siblings, none of which was true. Once she realized that her phone calls weren't working, she began making efforts to show up at the house again. She started to drive up and down our street, day after day. She would ask our neighbors, and then the neighbors' children, if anyone knew if I was home or where I was. She would park her car and watch our house, without anyone really noticing or saying anything. Eventually, our neighbors began to recognize her car and what was going on. They would inform my parents whenever she came around asking about me. After some time of doing this, she took it upon herself to come to the front door while only my brother, who was only 12 years old at the time, and I were home. She started banging on the door begging to see me. My brother opened one of the front doors, keeping the storm door between them closed, and told her to leave. She proceeded to plead with him to let her in. He replied that I was not home, despite me napping soundly upstairs. Cheers for my smart 12-year-old brother. And Candy partially forced herself through the door when my brother put his hand in her face, pushing her out of the door, and told her that the police had been called. She left after that, and distanced herself for a while before she encountered in the final straw with my mother. One day, my mother and I were backing out of the driveway to go attend a birthday party. Candy pulled in behind us, blocking us from leaving. She came up to the window. My mother rolled it down, ready to tell her off for good. Candy ignored her, looked right past my mother into the back seat where I was sitting. She said to me, "Wouldn't you rather come with me and never see your mom again? I love you so much more than they ever did, and I can give you everything you want if you just come with me." And this was the last straw for my mother. She never thought that she would upset or fight with an old woman, but the day had come when it was absolutely necessary. She screamed and yelled, making sure to include that Candy would regret the day she ever came into contact with me or my family. One of the threats she said must have actually really scared Candy, because she took off and didn't appear in our lives again until the Target bag incident. I'm not sure how I never knew any of this happened, and never thought anything was weird about her when I was a child, but I guess my parents did a good job of shielding me from the horrors of the situation. After hearing about everything that took place, I assumed that there must have been a reason she became so obsessed with me. Did she not have her own family? Did she lose children or grandchildren and wanted to find someone to fill the void? According to my mother, she had several children that were much older than me, as well as many young grandchildren. Thus, I'm not sure what would have sparked her interest in me. Thankfully, we no longer have to worry about her though. Part of me still wonders if I repressed any memories or conversations with her that were upsetting. Did she ever privately talk to me about how awful my parents were, or how she wanted to take me away? Did I ever agree to leave with her? I also wonder if, as I grew older and joined social media like Facebook, did she ever try to search my name? Did she watch me when I was in middle school, high school, or even when I went away for college? I have so many questions, but I'm glad that we never have to find out if she was going to follow through with any of her threats. And as a word of advice, always trust your grandmother's instincts about other grandmothers. Don't just befriend any random old woman volunteering on the playground. This happened 24 years ago, in the July of 1996. I had just finished my term of service with the Army. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and decided at midnight I would out-process and travel back to Wisconsin. All day I was so anxious to go that I had trouble sleeping. Finally, at 23:45, I got out of bed and went to sign out with the desk sergeant. Of course, knowing people wanted to sign out at midnight, he decided to do his rounds. You can't leave until after you get your final sign-off with the sergeant and turn in your room key. So I waited and waited, until finally at 0245 he returned. I turned my key in and got the sign-off, and at 0330 I was on my way. At first, I was so full of adrenaline that I felt like I could drive for days. Unfortunately, that didn't last long, and by the time I was getting through Dallas, I was starting to nod off. I decided just past Denton that I would pull over at the next rest stop and take a quick nap until the sun came up. I could barely keep my eyes open even when I finally came to a stop. I pulled over and got out of my car to get some fresh air and throw away something, get a look of my surroundings. There were only 3 other cars and 2 semi-trucks parked there. It was a picnic stop and not a rest stop, so there were no restrooms around. I threw my trash away and glanced at a poster of a few missing persons, but I didn't really pay any attention to it. I went back to my car, which was a basic Geo Metro. No radio, no power windows, no power locks. I cracked the windows open and turned on the boombox, had some tunes, and laid down to get some sleep. I was only asleep maybe 5 or 10 minutes when I felt my car shake just slightly. I cracked an eye open. I looked out but didn't see anything. I tried to blow it off and go back to sleep. I then suddenly heard what sounded like my door handle being pulled and scratching on the door key. I sat up quickly, but I didn't see anyone there. I looked at all the windows, but I couldn't make out anyone. Again, I shrugged it off as me being tired. I laid back down and turned up the radio all the way. Being a Texas night in July, it was hot, but I was so tired that I just laid back down. After a few more minutes later, though, I heard the door handle again, and this time the car really shook. I sat up quickly and saw a man standing at the passenger side looking in. Even though it was hot and humid, he was wearing a red sweatshirt with the hood up, and I couldn't make out his face at all. Being young and dumb and just out of the military, of course I yelled at him, "What the fuck do you want?" He just stared at me creepily, so like an idiot, I got out of the car. Mind you, I'm only 5'6", but I was completely pissed. He walked off towards the picnic tables, like nothing had ever happened. All the while I was yelling at him that if he came back I would take him out. I decided I would just drive on from there. I got back in and went on my way. Even though I was so upset, only about 10 miles down the road, I was super tired again already. Luckily, another 10 miles down I-35, there was another picnic stop. I'm not sure why North Texas doesn't have rest areas, but I guess they don't. I pulled into the second picnic stop and backed into a spot, just in case I needed to leave quickly. Not sure why, but there was only 1 other car there, and no semi-trucks at all. I again locked the doors, cracked the windows, and turned on my boombox. I fell asleep right away, but about 30 minutes later, I heard a loud thud on my driver's side window. I jumped up immediately and looked around, only to find no one was there. I once again got out of the car, which was very stupid, but I had my macho military attitude going. No one was around though. I assumed it was my nerves from the encounter at the other stop. I hopped back into my car, locked the doors again, and closed my eyes. This time though, I was too amped to fall asleep at all, so I just laid there silently with my eyes closed. I could feel that someone was looking at me. I opened my eyes a bit and saw the man standing there again in the red sweatshirt, hood up. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could clearly make out that he was smiling at me. I popped up real quick and tried to quickly open the door and bump him. Being a cheap geo since the doors were locked, of course it didn't open. He walked backward, staring at me the whole time. By the time I got out, he was about 30 feet away from me. It was fairly dark out, but as I looked him over, he looked fairly skinny. He was about 6'2" or 6'3" though. Still, I felt like I could take him with my military experience. He was wearing the red hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and green tennis shoes. For some reason, I noted that I thought the shoes looked quite odd. I could see something shiny every now and then as he stood there staring at me. I believe it was a machete. I quickly reached into my back seat and grabbed my baseball bat. I started yelling at him, "Come get some!" I'm not sure why I said that. He started walking towards me, and I took a few steps towards him, not really thinking at all. As I got about 5 feet from my car, and he was now about 15 feet from me, a yellow van pulled up real quick and parked just off to the side of my car. I finally realized what was really happening. I saw two men, also wearing hooded sweatshirts in the van. Before they could get out though, I ran back to my car. Thankfully, I had left the keys in the ignition. Since I had backed in, I was able to cut it hard right and peeled my car right out of there. I was so lucky being a manual car that I didn't stall it, because the other guys were out of the van, and the first guy was just about at my car. I jumped back on the interstate, and didn't stop until I was about 20 miles into Oklahoma. I stopped for gas and to use the restroom. In the restroom, I noticed that same flyer that I had barely glanced at the first picnic stop. It was basically a flyer with several missing persons on it, warning people not to stop for long periods of time at the rest areas. It described a possible suspect as being 6 foot, wearing blue jeans, green shoes, and a red hooded sweatshirt. It went completely white. Needless to say, since it was the daylight, I drove the rest of the way to Wisconsin wide awake. I'm not sure why, but I never reported it to the number on the flyer, or told anyone else about it. But I now live in North Texas, and pass those 2 picnic stops every day on my way to work. I think about it quite often. I wonder if they got anyone else, or if they finally caught them. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find any stories about it at all on the internet. I'm posting here as I think I'm finally ready to share my story. I moved to Sandbach in Cheshire, England around 3 to 4 years ago with an ex. He and I had broken up by this point, and we were just friends in the house we rented. Everything was going pretty great, to be honest. We weren't hostile towards each other. We had just found out we were better friends than in a relationship. I started going out to the bars and local shops to make friends, and see if anyone was as lonely as me by this point. I had moved from Chelsea, London, to be with my ex, and I didn't know anyone there. This was when I met Craig. He and I became best friends pretty quickly. He was a little odd, had family in the area and his own flat, so my ex moved away back with his family, and I couldn't afford the rent on my own anymore. Greg and I decided to rent our own house in Worcester, where his dad lived. His dad would be about a 5-minute drive away from the house we settled at. He and I were just best friends. We didn't do anything romantically, sexually, and he always had a few poor girls in tow. He would tell each of them that they were the one for him, he loved them, etc. He had around 7 girls on the go at one point even. I started seeing this guy Jay. He would stay over a few times and would eventually become my boyfriend. Craig hated it. We would argue about him. The fact of why should he care anyway? He and I were only best friends, and he needed to stay out of my dating life. It was then that things got physical. One night, Craig literally got on top of me in my room, put his knees on my arms, and started to strangle me. He was saying things like, "Where is he now?" I honestly thought I was going to die. My brain switched to my mom, who was 4 to 5 hours away, how she would never know, or would have to come identify the body of her own child. I don't know how, but I managed to kick Craig, and I ran as fast as I could. He had double-locked the front door. He had hidden my bag, and even smashed my new iPhone that I had gotten from my parents for my birthday. I was literally running down the stairs with him in tow, yelling about how he was going to kill me. I knew the back door was open from him having a smoke earlier, and there was a garden gate. All I needed to do was get that open. I ran for it, opened it up, and thankfully made it. The next thing I know, I'm out on the street in short shorts and a pajama top, barefoot. I just ran. I ran for a good half an hour towards town, and used a payphone to call 999. The police came and picked me up. I couldn't get back into the house, as Greg had the door key. I told them the whole story. They took me down to the station, had to unlock it, as it was past 1 in the morning by now. They took photos of my neck, which had bruising, and my head that was bleeding where he had smashed me into the kitchen wall earlier. I had to sit in a patrol car to go to my house, and they picked Craig up. He was out on the streets looking for me. I had to point him out and say, "That's him," to them. He said he was out looking for me because he was so worried. I don't think that's true, though. I think he was out looking for me to silence me, so I couldn't tell anyone. They arrested him, and I got told he would stay in a cell overnight. A policeman let me into my house, as they used a key that Greg had had. While I was in the house alone, I gathered up my things. I left my laptop, some clothes, shoes, and makeup in the rush. I thought I could easily replace them, and I just wanted to get away. I was so worried he would come back any second through the front door. I had no purse, no money, no phone. My parents lived 5 hours away. Thankfully, I don't know why, but I had the sense to hide my car key in my bra earlier that evening. I got into my car and drove to Morrison's petrol station. I was bleeding from my head, no shoes on and bruised all over. I broke down there and used my phone to call my mom. At first she was annoyed that I had woken her up, but then I explained everything to her. She ended up putting £200 in the petrol cashier's account for me to fill my car up, get some food and a hot drink to calm down. I then drove straight to my parents. I later got told through friends of a friend that Craig got released in the morning, as it was his word against mine. He smashed my laptop when he found out I wasn't at home anymore. Whatever. My stuff got replaced, and I'm now with an amazing guy who treats me like a queen. Sometimes I get flashbacks of the night where I truly believe I could have died. As for Craig, I blocked him, deleted everything to do with his family and him. I changed my number, and even broke off friendships with friends that knew both me and him. Please, let's never meet again, because this time, I'll be ready for you. When I was a teenager, I had quite severe mental health issues, which landed me in a few psychiatric hospitals. Some patients had very overt symptoms of various disorders, whereas for others it was harder to tell exactly why they were there. One girl in particular, Jess, was someone that I really admired. She was older than me by a few years, 18 to my 15, and represented to me the kind of cool, trendy, and laid-back adolescent I wished I could be. I really wanted to be friends with her, and was really happy when she started taking a liking to me. We started hanging out with each other every day in the ward, and still, after months, I had no idea what was wrong with her. One day, I just came out and asked straight up. I was worried she would be quite mad with me, but it turned out she wasn't. She said she was scared to tell me, that she'd had a relationship with a female teacher who was apparently married to a man at the time, and to save her reputation, the teacher claimed Jess had been harassing her. She said that they had been in love, and when she insisted this to be the case, she was removed from the school and placed in a hospital. In my 15-year-old brain, this didn't sound like something that could be too far-fetched. I felt like I knew Jess very well at this point, and she had never behaved in any atypical ways around me. I also had a lot of resentment at being there myself, so it wasn't a great cognitive leap for me to believe that the hospital staff, aka adults, hadn't done thorough research and just assumed she was delusional. She told me that although she was hurt and still had feelings for this person, she was slowly but surely getting over it. I apologized for asking, and we decided to move on. Eventually, we were both discharged from the psychiatric hospital, and Jess left a month or so before me, but we kept in regular contact. When I got out, we met up, and she asked if I wanted to attend a concert with her. I had never heard of the band, but I figured if she liked it, it would be worth seeing. I asked for more information so that I knew where I was going, but she just asked me to meet her at a nearby station that Saturday and said she'd lead us from there. Again, I completely trusted her. We ended up arriving at a huge stadium, which seemed to be holding some sort of event. I was confused as the band she had stated were largely unknown. I had anticipated a dive bar or some small independent venue. It was also really early for this much activity inside and out. Someone working the event walked over and handed me a flyer, which explained exactly what we had come to. It was a seminar conducted by a particular denomination of Christianity. Lots of shouting, healing, etc. It seemed like something run by a modern-day Jim Jones. I was mad but also extremely confused. I asked Jess what was going on. At first, she skirted around my questions. Eventually, she admitted that she believed her teacher would be attending this event, and she wanted to confront her about lying to the police and to the school. She insisted this was the last time she would be making any contact with her, and had decided it should be public, so that there would be people around to witness it. I'm not sure why she asked me to come along, and I didn't ask. However, thankfully I was smart enough to ask why she believed this teacher would be at the event. She revealed to me that she had driven past the teacher's home and found the flyer stuffed in the back of her letterbox. I was completely shocked. I started to realize for the first time that maybe none of what Jess perceived to be true, regardless of how sure and persuasive she seemed, was grounded in any reality. I was also starting to become nervous. I didn't want to make her angry or defensive. I tried to explain that it wasn't my thing and I needed to leave. She told me she wanted to stay, with the intention of searching every single row of chairs, completely impossible with the size of the venue, just to find this one woman. Jess tried to reach out to me regularly after that day, sending pictures, messages, and videos, but I always ignored them. I started to be scared of her, of what she would be capable of doing, and worried this obsession she had for her teacher would somehow translate over to me. Thankfully, eventually she gave up, and we never communicated again, but sometimes I still wonder what she's doing, from time to time. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I got a big update for you guys today. It seems like the Teespring store is finally online, so if everything's going well, you should probably be able to see all of the new merchandise on the merchandise shelf below the video. I got some mugs, I got some phone cases, and I got some t-shirts for y'all with the designs on them. All of the shirt designs are under one thing, so if you click on the sweatshirts, it should take you to a page where you can order a different variety of different kinds of shirts. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that. Let me know what you guys think, if it looks good, the pricing, everything. So look forward to that. As always, if you guys liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a story that you'd like me to read, or you have a story that you'd like to send in yourself, please be sure to check the description of the video below, as it contains all of the links to my social media, including my Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and Twitch accounts. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in, and what type of story it is, if it does have a type. Also, if you decide to send in a story, please be sure to properly format it into separate paragraphs. Thank you guys very much for that. If you guys are curious about the music used at all in this video, it's all listed in the description below, in the order of which it appears in, with links to all of the artists as well. So if you enjoy their work, please be sure to check it out and support them. Speaking of artists, as always, my friend Alan is doing the thumbnails for the videos now, so I have links to all of his art pages in the description as well. So if you like his art and you appreciate it a lot, please be sure to check out his pages and go support him, because he does some really great stuff. I think that's all for today, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.